Welcome to the Construction Leading Edge, the podcast dedicated to helping construction professionals become better entrepreneurs and leaders. Now, let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Construction Leading Edge, the site and podcast dedicated to helping construction professionals become more effective entrepreneurs and leaders. Today, we have a real treat with us. His name is Steve Armstrong. He is the president and COO of SG Blocks. And SG Blocks is a company that uses repurposed shipping containers to provide the building industry a safer, greener, faster, long-lasting, and more economical alternative to conventional construction methods. I had the opportunity to work for Steve for a couple of years, so this is a real treat for me. Steve, thanks so much for being on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Tom.
Well, thanks again for taking some time. I know you're extremely busy. The company is doing very well, and you got a lot of projects going on, so thanks for taking some time to chat with us. So first of all, I know your experience. I had the opportunity to work with you, but you have a very extensive background in engineering and construction. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, I can. My education is a structural engineer, and also have a master's degree in structure. So I've spent most of my early part of my career as a structural designer, civil engineer, and project manager of large-scale projects, both institutional and other commercial type projects. And I'm a registered professional engineer in multiple states. And I've been working the last about 7 years or so creating SG Blocks and really taking a concept and trying to take it to the next level and actually commercialize it and make it an ongoing new construction approach or construction process using a new material.
So that's full of challenges. So the last 7 years working on SG Blocks, what you didn't mention is that you spent some time working with what I think is an exceptional project manager on a high-rise senior living community. That happens to be myself. But we had a great project, and that worked out very well. You also spent some time in the Seabees, correct? Tell us a little bit about your experience and maybe some of the time you spent overseas in the military.
Yeah, I did. The Seabees are the Navy construction battalions, and they're a military construction and engineering arm. I spent 30 years either active or reserves in that program. Really enjoyed the opportunity to travel widely. I've been in North Africa, Europe, Middle East, and Western Baltics, South America, Central America, and into the Pacific and Hawaii and those type of areas. Construction and engineering are the same the world over. And it's I also spent time, almost 5 years, in a civilian capacity, building and managing the addition to a very large 1,000-bed hospital in Antwerp, Belgium. So I spent some time overseas doing that as well. But have had quite a bit of time both in the U.S. and outside the U.S. working in engineering and construction activities and projects and with various companies, some of them military, obviously, and then some civilian.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit about SG Blocks, what it's about, and especially I'm interested to hear how it got started. Where did you get the idea, and how was that conceived?
I actually got involved in this initially a little over 10 years ago. I received a call from a complete stranger who, to this day, I don't know how he got my name, but I was working as a private consultant, engineering consultant at the time, and he was a deck officer for the Merchant Marine Group, and I worked for various large shipping companies had sailed on container ships all over the world for quite a few years, and he came and asked if I could help him technically to take a potential project that he had in Charleston, South Carolina, and get it permitted, get it designed, get it permitted, and get it built. And the concept at the time, this was like I said about 10 years ago, there has been a lot of people trying to do things with shipping containers over the years, ever since the shipping container first came into use, which was well over 60 years ago. But nobody had ever, in the U.S., had ever done a permitted, approved building that got a C of O when they were finished. Most people were working with temporary, storage or, field office for a construction site or, things like that. They were not really permitted mainstream type construction, permanent construction. And so we did that, and it was the first project like that, and then went on to do a couple of others. And I was doing it as a private consultant with him. And about 2007, about 7 years ago, we got a call from the producers of Bob Vila Show, which people in construction are familiar with him, and he wanted to do some episodes on his show of a project we were doing down in Tampa, Florida, and so we did that, thinking it was just kind of a fun thing to do. And once we had done that and the episodes aired, we were inundated, literally inundated with calls and questions and inquiries, and to the point where it became something that we had to decide. So since that time, we stood up the company then, and have been working now to develop the technology and the process and the procedures to make it a mainstream system that can be used for virtually any type of construction.
So today, what sort of certifications and approvals do you have? Are you basically ASTM certified, and this is a technology that can be used anywhere in the United States, like any other building method?
There's not so much certifications as it is taking a building block. We refer to our SG blocks, we call them, or the modules that we create, as a building block. And when we need certifications, if you will, for instance, fire assembly ratings, or we need verification of structural stability and structural capability and so forth, we handle just like you would any other steel building. We have tests performed, but in most cases, we've developed models, computer models, where we can actually predict the behavior. Shapes and stacking schemes, we can now, because of some of the technology we've developed internally, can predict those just like a structural engineer does when he does a steel building or a block building or a wood building. He has to be able to substantiate the design and size the members and size the reinforcement. And so that's what we had to do to create that technology, because it was not available before.
Sure. So just to clarify, when you say a shipping container, we're talking about the 40-foot by 8-foot by 8-foot shipping containers that are shipped on a large cargo ship across the ocean in international shipping, correct?
That's correct. They're actually 9'6" high by 8 foot wide by 40 foot long. That's the most common one. There are a few other sizes, but that's the most common one that we use most of the time.
Okay. So you mentioned this is a new technology. So you have, looks to me like you have two layers of complexity. One, SG Blocks is a construction company. You're a contractor, in some cases a developer, a contractor, or subcontractor that is based on a new technology. So you have two levels of complexity. Tell us about how difficult that was to be able to build a business that is a construction entity based on a new technology.
Right. One of the things that we learned very early on in the process is that it's going to be very difficult, especially when you want to work in basically all 50 states and even internationally, to create the capability internally to do everything we need to do. So the decision we made, a strategic decision we made very early on, was to develop the core technology and a core staff who understood that technology, and then to bring aboard partners who provided either the capability, the equipment, or the facilities that we needed to fabricate, install, and of course, early on the design side, to design this stuff for us. So we have key partners who actually are part of the ownership of the company, who provide us with the containers. One of our partners is one of the larger depot operators in the U.S. So we have, if you're going to deal in containers, you got to have a reliable supply. So we had to tie that down first. And they also modify the boxes for us in their facility. So we did not have to stand up, a physical plant or a yard or hire the people necessary to do it, because these people were already modifying containers and repairing containers. We just brought them aboard and made them part of our team. And that was a key strategic decision, because it reduced significantly the amount of capital it took us to start up our business. Very difficult to do that from scratch. We also did a similar thing with the engineering, some of the engineering and design capability that we needed. One of our key partners is an engineering company that I had known for many, many years, structural engineer, and we worked with that group to develop our proprietary modeling software, and we use them to be the engineer of record on many of our projects. So that, another key piece of it that is outsourced, but to a partner who is tied in and has a vested interest and can share on the upside of what we're doing. So you have to structure yourself around all those vital pieces of the delivery system, and either to grow it internally or outsource it to partners you tie in, either through direct ownership or indirect contract ownership or contract relationships, so that you have a reliable source of that. And that was we primarily decided to outsource and partner.
And it sounds like that's been a successful strategic decision for you, correct?
Absolutely. It really, as I said, it lowered our capital requirements. It brought significant resources to the table that we would never be able to develop internally in a reasonable time frame. And it gave us, for instance, licensure in virtually every state. It gave us, I think we have 23 depot locations where we can fabricate these. Most areas of the U.S. were within a 500-mile truck delivery all from any place in the U.S., with the possible exception of the like Montana or northern tier states that are a bit more remote. But in terms of the coast, Mid-America, Southeast, Northeast, we have key resources, key plants, key depots that are partners that allow us to work this on a national basis and not just a single location.
Sure. Well, if you were trying to apply that to, let's say, a typical construction company, someone who's trying to start up a contracting business, what sort of strategies would you advise them to use in the way of developing key partnerships? Or what sort of people should they look for? What sort of strategic partnerships would you advise them to develop?
Well, friends and so forth, you have to develop you have to have a degree of comfort, a degree of respect, and a real understanding of their capabilities. And finding good partners is the hardest part of doing anything like this, whether it's SG Blocks or any other company. We were extremely fortunate in that we were able to pull in virtually all cases, entities that we had known or had relationships with in other scenarios, if you will, especially on the engineering and design side. I had worked with the structural engineer that we now partner with for almost 30 years, and at various times and in various types of situations and various projects and different companies. So if you can find something like that, to me it just stresses over your working lifetime, which you maintain the contacts, maintain the relationships that you have. It may be that you may work with them for a while and then they go away, or your situation changes, or their situation changes, and they move on, and you may not see them for a while. But the industry's too small, and the opportunities are so great that you're almost certainly going to bump into people again, or seek them out if you know the expertise they have and they need that expertise. So I would really encourage anybody that's thinking of being an entrepreneur and trying to start something from scratch, that go back to the people that you trust and have trusted in the past. Whether you've been in the business a long time, I've been in business for 45 years now, but whether you've been in for 5 years, 10 years, or longer, there are going to be contacts. There are going to be people that you've worked with that you know that you trusted and they were good, and you seek out people that you know and trust.
Sure.
I've had great success with that. I've been very blessed that people I've worked with, either with, for, or partnered with in the past, have been very supportive of what I'm doing now, and some of them are actually, full-fledged partners now.
So take care of the relationships at all stages in your career, because it's a small world, and it may help you someday. And this is something I learned later in my career, is that really it's the personal relationships that make the work enjoyable.
That's right.
Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. I mean, it's you find good people, and then you develop the relationship. And again, it's just like you develop a friendship, a professional friendship, as well as in many cases there's a personal relationship where you just enjoy being with these people and you enjoy working with them. And there's nothing wrong with that, and I certainly encourage it. And you'll find as you advance in your career, those types of relationships become very, very important to you, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, and as I said, that's something I learned late in my career, and really I learned it working with you. I noticed how I learned from you how important it is to develop relationships, and that it's okay and beneficial to have relationships with the people you work with outside of work. And my approach prior to that really was work is work. We need to keep things separate, some sort of, I don't know where this idea came from, but not fraternizing with people from work. But I realized that was wrong. So I appreciate you modeling that, and I've tried to apply that since then. Let's talk about the transition that SG Blocks has gone through over the past few years. It started out as a lean, mean, small, nimble, entrepreneurial endeavor, literally working out of a house, not necessarily working off a card table, but it started from scratch basically, and it's now a public company. What's one thing that you would do differently if you could go back into your entrepreneurial days prior to becoming a public company? What's something that you would do differently as an entrepreneur to set you up for a more successful transition into a public company?
I think what the public markets want are predictability and reliability of the information and data. And believe me, it is very hard to go back after you've been in business for a couple of years as a private entity and to create the documentation, the information, and so forth that can be verified. And as in the public markets on Wall Street or NASDAQ or over the counter, it doesn't matter when you're dealing with the SEC. They are very, very strict about what you are required to do as a public entity, and a public company. And many entrepreneurs chafe at what the SEC requires because they're used to operating, more or less freely. I mean, you make your own decisions, and you don't have a lot of oversight. I mean, you got to follow general accounting rules and practices and all those types of things. But the general accounting rules, it's amazing how much interpretation there is, and then how some of those general accounting practices and rules are more stringently going into it from a private company to a public company. You need to, from the day you make that decision that you want to do that, you need to make sure that you are documenting and organizing your company so that it can make that transition without completely disrupting your operation. And I've seen other companies that have tried to go public, and that's one of the first things they want that they do. That going public becomes so disruptive to their operation that there's some things that are lost in the process.
So what are a couple of specific things, whether it's the business structure or how your financials, how your accounting systems are set up? What are a couple of specific things that people should be aware of?
Well, I'd say, first of all, it is the accounting system. There are lots of different types of software out there, and lots of accountants that can help. We first started out when we were really, really lean and mean. We had, we handled our accounting internally, but we realized early on that the type of expertise we needed, accounting expertise, tax expertise, those types of things that we needed, financial acumen, to get that quality of a person, with the experience we needed, we're going to have to do it as an outsourced type situation. So I really would encourage anybody who can. There's a real tendency to want to do it internally. Just hire yourself a bookkeeper and just do it. But if you have any hopes of really growing this, whether you go public or not, if you just have hopes of growing it to the point where you can have a fairly significant company and fairly significant revenues, you're going to be much better off to have it professionally done. Just like you want a professional engineer, professional project managers to handle your construction and engineering activities, you want a professional financial person who really knows what he's doing and can keep you out of trouble with the type of documentation and recording and compliance and all those types of things.
So is it safe to say your advice would be to get legal and financial professional help sooner rather than later?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's too late to go public. It's too late. It's not too late. It's just very expensive and very difficult, and you may not be able to even take it public if you don't have your collective act together in terms of your contracts and accounting and tax records and compliance, compensation agreements, all those types of things that are it's all kind of the administrative side of things. That and it's what I've found with many smaller entrepreneurial companies that is the principals are too busy delivering product and they don't spend enough time dealing with the administrative side of things, and there's a tendency to let that go by the wayside more than you should.
Sure, I can see how that can happen. Entrepreneurs are generally good at, as you said, creating products and delivering value and creating revenue, sales and revenue, and the administrative side doesn't pay the bills. But long-term view taken, you really should spend some time on that from day one, because it's very difficult, sometimes impossible, to go back and recreate it. Good stuff. Talk to us a little bit about the process of raising capital. What should a business owner who's considering raising capital know and be aware of before they get into that?
One thing that I learned fairly midway through my career is that there are literally thousands, if not tens of thousands, just all kinds of really great ideas out there. I mean, really great ideas. And many great ideas never go anywhere off the inventor or the designer's desk because lack of capital. It doesn't help to have a great idea if you don't have a way to take it to market. And what I learned early on in this process, when we first started the company, we had myself as an engineer and construction person. I had my other partner was the merchant mariner who was a deck officer on a ship and knew containers inside and out, knew where to get them, how to modify them. He was very familiar with containers, so we thought we had it surrounded. That we had everything we could possibly ever need because we knew our product, we knew the engineering, we knew how to build things. But what we soon found out was you need to, against the accounting side of it, you need professional financial help. You need somebody who works and knows in the capital circles, if you will, which is one of the reasons that we found a partner who was headquartered or was a lifelong resident and working in New York City. That's where our headquarters is for our company. It's the center of the financial world, basically, or at least the center of the U.S. financial world. We went and partnered with him and brought him aboard because we needed that access to the people with capital and the people who were looking for entrepreneurial type companies that they would want to potentially invest in. So delivery, if you will, because we had the container supply side, which my partner, who was in the merchant marine, provided that. I provided the construction engineering, and our other partner provided the access to the financial markets and financial. It basically has a developer financial background, and that investing, especially private investing for entrepreneurs, is a lot of relationships and a lot of developing the contacts with the folks that are looking for places to invest. And if you don't travel in those circles, you got to find somebody who does.
Well, so let's say you're a construction company who's looking for access to capital. Where would you start looking for investors?
Well, I would probably, if you, one of the leads that I initially got when I first started out was I went to my accountant. We did have an accountant, and he had very good contacts regionally. I made some presentations to him and to people that he worked with and does their taxes and as a financial advisor too. And he manages wealth for quite a few folks. And you got to go out. You got to travel in the right circles. And so if you don't personally travel in those circles, you have to reach out to folks that do. And generally, the selection of the accountant that you're going to use could be one of the first key steps that puts you at least locally in that circle of people who have the money that might be interested in investing in a local idea, a local company that they would participate in. So that would be the first place I would go, and then if probably immediately following that. Another way to do it is to try to match up with maybe a smaller but rapidly growing either construction firm, engineering firm, whatever it is that you're interested in, and see if you can partner with them where you can bring something to the table and they can bring something to the table, and just look for those kind of partnering relationships.
Along the lines of you brought up a good point that selecting an accountant could be the first step in having access to capital. Would you advise an entrepreneur to consider using a larger accounting firm versus, say, a one-man show accountant for that reason, because they have a larger reach and have more access to investment capital?
Selected here in Nashville, where I live, is a relatively, I say, small to mid-sized firm with good local contacts. And those smaller firms generally, the entrepreneurs the folks that have money to invest in things like this, generally are going to stick to those, I say, small to mid-sized local firms, usually. The bigger firms, larger companies go to those firms. My experience is you kind of get lost in those firms. They're too big. You're going to wind up, because you're a small company, you're going to wind up with a junior person. Not that they're not capable to handle your accounting and taxes and so forth, but you're usually not going to deal at the partner or principal level. Whereas with a smaller company, you're going to deal at the partner or principal level. And those are the folks that travel in the circles that you want.
Gotcha. So to recap, for someone who's considering going down the road of raising capital, options or strategies would be to find a partner who runs in those circles, or get yourself in those circles, develop relationships with people in the financial sector. Selecting an accountant is a key strategic move, and you would recommend going with a small to mid-size accounting firm who caters to entrepreneurs, maybe not so much the large corporate accountants for the reasons you mentioned. Would investment advisors and attorneys also be a good source of making connections with high wealth individuals or potential investors?
It's a possibility. I haven't tried that myself personally, but I know folks who have. Again, it's all about relationships. I mean, it's about introductions. It's about getting exposure to folks. There's a lot of investment cash out there. There's a lot of capital available. Most people don't realize that, but there is a lot of money chasing good projects and good investment, and then it becomes a matter of exposure. And one of the things that I certainly would do as just last week I went to the AISC, American Institute of Steel Construction annual conference in Toronto. Made a presentation there about our system, and anybody in the steel construction and design world, including developers, fabricators, engineers, architects, equipment suppliers, all these folks that are involved in that industry, they're there. And that exposure is just unbelievably helpful in getting your name out, getting your idea out, allowing you to network with people in the industry. And it's amazing the contacts. I came back with a stack of cards, probably 40 or 50 people that over the next couple of months I need to make contact with for various reasons. Some of them are vendors that I need to work with. Some of them are developers who I'd like to do projects with, and some of them are investors that are investors go to these things too to find out what's going on and see what's the next biggest and best thing coming down the pipe. So you got to make yourself available. You got to get out. It doesn't have to be an absolute best engineer sitting behind your desk. You got to be a good engineer, but out in front of other people who need your services or interested in helping you. So that's the key thing.
Great. That's great advice. All right. So you're a guy who's been in the industry, been in business for 45 years. Tell us some not so obvious characteristics or metrics of a successful business. So in other words, what are some things that you look for that may not be so apparent when you look at a business to determine whether or not it's a successful business?
Well, I would say the first one is just you have to be, of course, good at what you do. If you decide, if you're an engineer, if you're a builder, if you're a fabricator, whatever it is that you do, you need to make sure that you're good at it. If you're good at what you do, other people will recognize that, and they will you will be successful. With a little help from some investors, a little help from a little exposure and so forth. But you have to know what you're doing. And I've known, I don't know how many, contractors especially, but even engineers and architects, they were okay, but they probably would, their career would be better to work for somebody else rather than try to make it on their own. And that's, I'm not trying to put them down or anything, but it's just, it's a fact. You have to set yourself apart. You have to have something that other people really want. So you got to stand out. And with our shipping container construction, the product helps us stand out. But being recognized as really the only firm that has successfully got this permitted and taken it out and done it on a larger scale really establishes us as the premier delivery firm for this type of product. So you've got to be at or near the top to really be successful, and people have to recognize that. The second part of it is really I call professional honesty. There are going to be many times, and I can't tell you how many times, even in the very past few months, where you just have to say no, either to a project or to a situation, relationship, or whatever. It's a hard thing to do because when you're out trying to start a business, you want to take on all comers. You want anything that comes across your desk you want to do because it's business and you need business and you want to do it. But you have to be discerning about what you take on. Don't overextend, and don't the honesty. I hate to admit it, there's a lot of situations out there where you just say, well, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out, or I'll find somebody that can do it for me, or whatever. It's a level of professional honesty. Do what you do best. Don't overextend beyond your capabilities. And if you do that, people will recognize it, and it'll help you be successful.
So be the best at what you're doing. Being okay is not just good enough. It sounds like in today's economy, and especially with construction and engineering, things are starting to rebound, but you really have to be the best, and then you have to stand out somehow from the crowd. And what I heard you say was to be focused, be discerning. Professional honesty is important, and don't say, you can't have the speech impediment where you can't say no, right? You have to be able to say no and not chase every opportunity that comes along. Good stuff. What are some common mistakes that you see construction professionals make in the area specifically of leadership?
Well, you're only as good as the weakest link in your organization. If you have people working for you, if those people aren't learning and aren't as capable as you need them to be, that's your fault. That's not their fault. You chose them. You hired them. You should be training them. And if they fail, it's as much your fault as theirs. So, that's why I look at leadership is finding good people, put them in the right opportunity. Don't hire somebody to do something that he's not capable of. Don't put him in an unwinnable situation because he'll fail. And then that's bad for him. It's bad for you. But the key thing is, in terms of leadership, is be open and honest with your clients. Keep them informed. You can't be a wallflower. You can't when you're in meetings or when you're with your client or when you're with sub-consultants that you've hired or subcontractors that you've hired. If you call the meeting, you've got to lead the meeting. If it's important that you be there, you need to get from that meeting, whatever your goals are. You set those goals, you set your agenda, and you follow it. That's all part of leadership. That's taking control. That's managing the whatever the situation is, whatever the problem is, whatever the meeting is, whatever the project is. You need to take control, and you should be able to walk into a room. And I think, Todd, you and I have talked about this before. You walk into a room, you pretty much know who's in charge and who the leaders are. You figure that out after about the first 2 or 3 sentences, and you need to take charge. You don't have to be, so aggressive that it becomes a problem, but you need to be in control of the situation, and in control could be leading somebody else to take the lead and get what you need out of them, and encouraging them and so forth. That's also part of leading, is to encourage those folks that either are doing the work for you to step up and take charge at that moment when you need them. So to me, that's what it's all about. It's management, control, and taking the lead. People will follow if you take the lead.
But you can't wait for people to follow you to become a leader. Is that what I'm hearing you say? You need to step forward and take the lead, take the reins. And would you say that people are looking for leadership, that they want to follow a solid leader?
I could tell you in many projects I've been involved in as a project manager, whether it's the owner client, whether it's the engineers, whether it's the contractors, suppliers, it takes a whole team to put any major project together. And when you meet with these folks and you work with these people, they have a piece of that responsibility, regardless of what it is. But the only person who really has control and is responsible for the overall project is when you're a project manager like that, is that project manager. So you need to control the agenda, control the pace, control the flow of information. Control is probably not the best word. Manage is probably a better word. Manage that information and flow so that the right people get the right information. And when that happens, those people will, number one, they'll have respect for your management capability. They'll have confidence in that they're getting the information they need, and they can do their jobs the way they need to do it. And then you'll have a successful endeavor.
Yeah. I think one misconception that people have is that in the context of a project, some people believe that most people don't want leadership. That if you extend yourself as a leader and step forward as the leader, people would be offended and think that you're trying to be the boss or you're trying to get something. But my experience has been in a team where you have, as you said, people who have an individual piece. They want someone to lead the effort, and they want strong leadership. They appreciate it, and they'll support good leadership.
Sure. Sometimes you have to be careful you don't usurp other people's responsibility. And there's a subtle difference there. But fundamentally, people want organization, and they want confidence in the information and the structure of the team. As I said, the team is only as strong as the weakest link. And if you got a sub or an engineer or contractor or even an owner client who's weak and is not holding up their end, the whole team will suffer.
Absolutely. I've seen it. I'm sure you've seen plenty of examples of weak leadership and the results of that. I've decided that I want to be a strong leader. I want to work with strong leaders because I think it's leadership, quality leadership, that really that's one of those factors that will make a company stand out, even if you're the best technically. Providing strong leadership internally and then to your clients will cause you to stand out. We're coming up toward the end of the interview. I want to ask you a couple more questions. One would be if you could go back in time to the Steve Armstrong, say 20 years ago, and give yourself one piece of advice other than lottery numbers, stock picks, in the context of business and leadership, what's one piece of advice you would give the Steve Armstrong from 10 or 20 years ago?
That's a tough question. I'm very happy with the way things have evolved. I was very fortunate early in my career to work with some very, very good engineers and project managers. And about 20 years ago, about 25 years ago, I made the decision to stop working for other people and become an entrepreneur and start my own business and eventually start other businesses. But I would say what would have helped me earlier on if I would have taken a little bit more time to prepare myself for the business side of whatever I'm doing, whether it's construction or engineering. I spent a lot of time early in my career trying to learn as much as I could about engineering, about construction, about means and methods, and that has served me very well. I've had some great experiences and great projects I've worked on, so I learned a lot. But if you ever have hope of running your own business or starting companies, the technical side of it, the expertise, your chosen expertise is just that. It's just that. It's one part of it. That's one piece of the puzzle. The business side of it will be equally important, and most engineers, unfortunately, and many contractors never really get exposure to the business side of things until they've been thrown into it and become very heavily responsible for it, and then they're ill-prepared and ill-equipped to manage that part of it. Accounts payable, accounts receivable, inventory control, all those types of things that I think all of us as engineers were lucky to have taken one formal course in our education about accounting, if that, and then we kind of go away from it and don't see it again until we have this crazy idea to start our own business, and all of a sudden we have to do it again.
That's right.
So that'd be one thing I would say is that you need to be technically competent, but you also need to be able to handle the administrative side. So every opportunity you have as you're coming up and working, earlier in your career, do whatever you can to get some exposure to the business side of things.
Sounds like great advice, and I know I had the same experience. I started my own business and knew the construction side and naively thought that's really the most important thing, but it was maybe 50%. Honestly, I probably would have been better off to be stronger on the business side and weaker on the construction side, because the business side is really what kicks your butt if you're not careful. I've seen it so many times with contractors especially. So that's great advice. So I appreciate that. Last question, and I ask everyone this question: what is one book or two books on either business or leadership that you would recommend that our listeners go out and buy and read?
Wow. This may sound funny, but I was just talking about this with somebody at this Toronto conference recently. The book Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus?
Right.
It was, I read that, I don't know when it first came out, many years ago, and I read it again here about 2 years ago, and there are parts of that it's about relationships. It's about building relationships and how people perceive each other and so forth, and it doesn't apply directly to leadership as such, but it's one of those things where it kind of made me more sensitive to how people think, regardless of what gender they are, but how people think and what their expectations are. And the second time I read it, I kind of thought back, and I could think of case after case or circumstance after circumstance where what they were saying was absolutely true. It was about how you develop relationships, how you anticipate needs, and how you work and play and react with people and develop relationships over a long period of time. I know it's a little unorthodox, but to me it's a couple of lights went off, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I can see that completely, and that's we talked about the importance of business acumen, technical acumen, but one of the things that I've learned just in the last few years is the importance of relationships. It's that there's the IQ, but then there's what some people call the EQ, the emotional quotient, where you can read people and develop relationships, and as you said, anticipate needs, know how to communicate. I realize my communication style is not the same as a lot of other people, and I can't be an effective leader if I'm trying to shove my style down their throat, and need to be able to adapt to that. So I think that's great advice that everybody can take. So, Steve, we're about out of time. I really appreciate you doing the interview. If people want to find out more about SG Blocks or get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Actually, the best way is through our website, sgblocks.com. Pretty straightforward. Of course, they can see and learn more about the company. It's a pretty decent website. And there's a contact information in there, and they can reach me that way. It'd be the best way, I think.
Fantastic. sgblocks.com. I'll put a link in the notes to this podcast, so if you want to find out more about SG Blocks, maybe consider it for a project or share it with some of your other clients. It's very exciting. As I mentioned in the introduction, it's a sustainable, I suppose, one of the sexier parts about SG Blocks is the fact that it's green construction, it's lean construction, and it's sustainable. Is that right?
Absolutely. It's repurposing a product that was an instrument of trade into an instrument of construction, and it's unique but it's also practical, very practical.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense, and I think it's a great example of how you can find a seam in the industry and create a new product and create a niche, and you don't necessarily have to go with the same old sticks and bricks and methodologies. There are always other alternatives out there, and you guys have been very successful. You've gone from a startup company through now you're a public company. The company's growing extremely well. If investors want to find out more about your business, can they go to SG Blocks as well? Is there an investor relations part there?
Yeah, there's investor relations there, and information. Of course, all of our information is, since we're a public company, is all available with links to our website. So, yeah.
Sounds great. Well, Steve, man, it's been good chatting with you. Always a pleasure. Hope the family's doing well, and I appreciate you taking time to do the interview, and this has been some great stuff.
Yes, I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to The Construction Leading Edge. Head on over to www.constructionleadingedge.com for the show notes and more resources. Be sure to subscribe to our email list on the homepage to make sure you receive information and updates. See you next time on The Construction Leading Edge.